This meeting is called to order. We'll begin the evening with the swearing in of our new council member, Mr. Keith Reed, for the District 2 seat. Big entrance.
Right on time.
We get some pleasantries.
Short and sweet.
I, Keith Reed,
Do solemnly swear that I will support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States, and that the Constitution and laws of North Carolina, not inconsistent therewith, and that I will faithfully carry out the duties of my office as councilman for the town of Fletcher, so help me God.
I will.
That's it. Congratulations. I'm going to give you this nice copy. I'm just going to back. That's okay. And this is yours, and you can do this.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next item of the agenda. Do you have anybody signed up for public comment? Or anybody else to speak during public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to updates from council. Do you have any updates?
I just wanted to mention that the next council meeting next Monday, I'll have a DOT update on the project in Henderson County and close in Baltimore County.
Anything else? I will say one thing, I know we all discussed it in the letter in response to Commissioner Mike Addy. I haven't sent the letter just yet. I just want to have one more conversation on it. We'll probably have a conversation after we talk about the ARP item on the budget. A little bit related to that, send a letter, make a request for that library project. Moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any questions about the consent agenda?
Mayor, if I can just, on the item about approval of the audit contract, we'll probably keep that on as there may have to be a single audit update change if we have to bid out because of these audit thresholds with ARP monies or the ARPA monies. So if that happens, we will bring this back to you if that has to be the case where we have to bid that out. This was previously bid for a multi-year, and every year we have to approve the audit contract for this upcoming fiscal year ending. So I just want to let you all know that.
Since you're on the subject, Mark, I've noticed, correct me if I'm wrong, it didn't have anything about internal control procedures, like with their recommendations, was that, it's just that they don't do that type of thing?
Yeah, they do. They'll look at the overall process. They put some language in there, that unqualified opinion. I've never understood really why, because they're a CPA auditing firm, but that is part of the process of what they do look at. And because they make suggestions on division of duties, or separation of duties to put more controls in. Like, for example, someone else counting the money down and checking that.
Yeah, so I was reading through it right there, but they said they wouldn't be doing their comments on internal controls.
Yeah. I guess they not every year, but they have to go through and they check that we're following our processes and following generally accepted accounting standards for management of our finances.
All right. Anything else? We'll move on to the year-end tax collector's report from Ms. King.
I left you the copy of your report, and let me go over it with you just a little bit. This is strictly for 2021 taxes that we billed out this fiscal year. That first number that you see, that's strictly the number that we actually billed from Henderson County tax scroll that they sent to us, that 4.4 million. That's strictly just from them, what we get from them. We bill that out, go through it. Our discoveries that you see there, that 98,000, you have to understand that a big portion of that is from Department of Revenue. That's all the utilities that they have to certify. We don't do those billings until October, so we have to follow them under the discoveries. We did have a scroll from Henderson County. They done some businesses that we went back and done prior years plus current years, but you do show it under your levy for 2021. So that would be that 98,000 that we actually billed out. The releases there, that 7,000, that is all the releases that y'all have seen through the months, starting July through January. So that's $7,500. We've collected through January the 31st that 4.4 million, which left $74,182.69 the end of January. Through today, our balance is $48,106. We've collected another $26,000 since February the 1st. Second notices went out right after January the 6th when they became delinquent, and we have called and collected quite a bit of it. So as of today, we're 99% collected. We are going to advertise anything that we have not collected. That ad will go into the paper on March the 24th. And we will charge $5 for all of those that are outstanding, and we'll collect that to pay for the ad.
Any questions? Thank you, Council. We thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next item on the agenda, the introduction of applicants to council for the 3 vacancies. We have 2 at-large vacancies and 1 District 2 vacancy. I'm going to call everybody up, not cut the order by last name, and give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. Just be mindful of your time. In addition to that, after you introduce yourself, I'll give council a chance to ask any questions. One in that, we call Mr. William Lee Bowser.
Good evening. William Lee Bowser, coming forward and looking to planning and zoning. Give you a little bit of my experience. I was on town council for 8 years, mayor pro tem for 3. I was involved with planning and zoning of that group. Smaller town, so we did a lot of things without a lot of help, so we had to learn a lot, but we got there. I like what I have seen with the Greenway, Town Center, the heart of Fletcher looks good. Your zoning is excellent, a whole lot better than what I was accustomed to seeing most part of the time. And I just look forward to helping it proceed. Everything's in place, it's just a matter of following through with what's already there. As far as if development was to come forward with my 20 years experience in real estate, I've been on both sides, whether it be the council and or the person delivering, trying to get what they wanted. So I understand both sides of that. And with that, any questions?
Could you explain just a little bit what a health, safety, and environmental specialist is?
Okay, I'm a health safety environmental. Basically, for a plant, we have about 250 people. I am kind of an overview certified, anyone in the country, of this facility, or our group. So I'm well versed in environmental impact, definitely chemicals and everything that goes with that from an industrial point of view. And also with that, I was in supervision and management in industry for over 20 years, so I have the overview of all those different variables. And having my own real estate business for 8 years, I understand small business too.
Thank you.
Being in that position right there for planning board, what's your vision that you see for Fletcher should be in the future?
Well, of the small amount of time I've had to, look at what's in place, basically what I'm seeing is we're looking at recreation. We're looking at making it a very pleasant place to be for everyone. But we're also with the heart of Fletcher, it looks like we're trying to move forward with a pedestrian-friendly, old shop kind of a view, similar like maybe Hendersonville or Statesville when I was involved helping them a little bit with the way they completely redid their city. And that's what people are looking for. Yeah, we have to go to work, but then when we get off work, we want to have some relaxation time. We want to have some things to do. The ball field down at Wilmore are excellent. It's an outstanding park. I mean, to be recognized as one of the best in Western North Carolina says a lot about it right there. But as far as my view is just basically going forward with where the plans are already in place. I mean, from what I've been able to see, there's been a lot of time spent, a lot of input, and it's just a matter of follow through, and then the variables that come at you from different people that you don't know about yet. But yeah, everything seems to be in place, it's just follow through.
Could you speak of your membership in Charlotte Regional Planning? Could you elaborate on that?
Basically, it was just an overview for transportation, make sure that at one time, Troutman owned the rights to the internet, so I was heavily involved in the internet between Troutman, Mooresville, Statesville, 5 communities. At that time, had I been able to get the idea across a little bit more, Troutman would just about be a tax-free community from the input off of the internet. That was part of it. And then also because Charlotte, everybody's squeezing one another together, it's kind of like, okay, this is where we need to come to an agreement, let's not go here, let's not move into there. Trying to control the annexation, the sheer growth in every direction. When I moved there in 1980, it was a small area and it just completely exploded. So every town, when one stopped, another one started. And that was part of trying to coordinate it all. And then when you had business come in, kind of see who had the best resources for that business and maybe steer them to a different way. Not overtax a small community when a community of the region is better suited for that.
Thank you so much.
Anything else, Council? Well, thank you, Mr. Bowser.
Thank you for your time. Agreed.
Next we have Dr. James Brugman. Sorry if I said your last name incorrectly.
Very good.
Thank you.
I could hardly hear. I don't know about any of you. Couldn't hardly hear any of you.
I'm glad you brought that up. It brought to my attention that the audience is having a very hard time hearing us up here. So if we speak, it would be a good idea to bring the microphone closer. And we are in the process of trying to get a new system. It's just not here yet. So
Okay.
if you can't hear us, let us know. We'll talk even louder.
Okay, thank you.
And it also helps for the speakers to speak into the microphone as closely as possible.
Testing 1, 2. Greetings. Appreciate the opportunity to present myself before you and my qualifications. I assume everybody, the council members and Mr. Mayor, have all seen my application and the addendum, so I just won't repeat all of that unless I'm supposed to do that for the public. But just very briefly, I'm from Ohio, originally born and raised, graduated from the Ohio State University with a degree in journalism and public relations, worked for a private PR firm then went to work for the City of Columbus Department of Development, which consisted of the divisions of planning, zoning, and code enforcement. I was the sole public information officer there, and after I left there, we moved to Palm Beach County, Florida, where I founded a construction company with my brother, and we grew rather rapidly, and we, of course, had a lot of dealings with the planning and zoning departments in Palm Beach County, and we moved to the mountains in 1987, and I was a residential contractor here. Did I say I was a general contractor in Florida? We started a construction company, and I was the one that held the general contractor's license. Moved here, became a residential contractor, also worked as for a very large construction company in the area for 3 years, and then changed careers totally. So and in the meantime had a real estate broker's license. So I've had a broad breadth of experience before I switched careers into my present career about 30 years ago. So, any questions?
Any questions, council?
What kind of visions you have for Fletcher, if you serve on the board of the planning board?
What I could hear, and I couldn't even catch his name, but what I did hear of the previous speaker, I concur with that. Fletcher is a wonderful place to live, which is why my family and I left Buncombe County in 2006 and moved here to Fletcher. We just thought this was just a wonderful, family-friendly place to live. And what I see, I like what I see with the movement towards the heart of Fletcher with it seems like it's going in the same direction as Hendersonville, where it's very pedestrian friendly in the downtown area. And I firmly believe in controlled growth in a town or city limits. If I take the 40,000-foot perspective and looking at our history nationally, over 200 years ago, we had some very brilliant men that were tired of an overbearing government, and they succeeded in putting together a nation from 13 disparate colonies with all kinds of different viewpoints and perspectives, but they all agreed that government that grows too big becomes tyrannical. It's just a fact of nature and a fact of history. And so I have always been a student of the Constitution and believe that government should be strictly limited by the bounds of the Constitution, as Thomas Jefferson said. George Washington said, "Government, like fire, is force. It can be a faithful servant or a fearful master." None of us wants to live in a totalitarian dictatorship. But one of the reasons my wife and our family moved to Henderson County was to escape Buncombe County. And we see it's a disaster area right now in terms of overbearing, overreaching government. So I do believe government should be strictly limited by law, by the Constitution, and by the governing laws of the town of Fletcher. But I would seek to balance that very fine line between the needs of the whole community and without trampling on individual rights. That summarizes it.
The city of Columbus, the duration that you were serving on planning, zoning, and code enforcement, is there any one particular issue that might have stood out in your mind after your experience there? And how big was the population back in the day when you were there?
The metropolitan area is about 2 million, and we had about 360 people in the Division of Planning, Zoning, and Code Enforcement.
Real.
The director and my office was 10 feet away from his, so, and we had a couple of floors on a major skyscraper in Columbus. He had been the architect of the state office building, which in its day was the tallest building in Columbus, 50 stories, and that led him to become in his position. But I discovered some very unsettling things when I was in my position there. because I had free reign of the whole several floors to gather information, to issue press releases, to deal with the media, and basically my job was to make the boss look good. And so I was arranging press conferences for him and other media appearances. But what really disturbed me was in the conduct of many people there. And in particular, I remember one fellow that I had played street football with when I was in the 8th grade. We were neighbors. And there he was. This was many years later. Hadn't seen him. His name was Scott, and I'll just leave it at that. And he comes into my office and says, "Hey, James, what you doing? Good to see you," and all that kind of stuff. And then I said, "So what do you do here?" He said, "Nothing." I said, "What do you mean, nothing?" He said, "Oh, I just walk around with a coffee cup in my hand all day long, and people assume I'm on break." And I was just stunned and couldn't believe it. And then I found out, and he said, "Oh, there's a lot of people that do that." That is abominable. And that's one of my main takeaways from my experience there.
Very good, thank you.
Fortunately, Fletcher's small.
Very
You're not going to have that kind of problem.
Yeah.
Anything else?
You have anything else for council? No.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Next we have Miss Leslie Cuevas. Cuevas?
I'm Leslie Cuevas. I've been a resident of Fletcher since 1989. And my husband and I have raised two sons here. Both have moved away. One lives in Atlanta and the other one lives in Charlotte. And over the years, I have just watched Fletcher blossom. From the 2 lanes that we used to have on Hendersonville Road to now the 4 and then the middle lane, which has just been wonderful. So the way that the town of Fletcher has grown has been quite responsible, and I've enjoyed raising our sons here. The thing is that the town of Fletcher, like many counties here around, the professionalism for our young adults is not there. You can become a factory worker, but the ways that we have grown and have taught our children has been just that, to become a factory worker or start your own business, which both of them have done. But in other cities, and I would love to see this development happen in the city, in the town of Fletcher. We've seen lots of kids come and go, and I think now is the time, if we continue to grow responsibly with our students, with our children that are coming up, with our young adults, and just what we see as a vision for the city, the town of Fletcher. I think it would be wonderful to make sure that we include those young people in that site. So as I said, my husband and I have built a home in the Wildwood subdivision in 1989. We've been residents there ever since. In 1993, we purchased property on Old Airport Road that we pastor a church on. It's Tabernacle of Praise, and so we have been there since then and continue on. So just as a homemaker that went to work after her children went to college, and now I'm retired, I have a little bit more time to devote to, working with the town, and I would like to do that. So, questions?
Questions from council?
You say with the children and growing in the vision, so what vision, can you give me some examples of the vision you're talking about for our future generations?
I think the way that I have seen, Mark had shown me some center development plans that they have, and I think that will really help bring in the type of jobs, professional jobs that our children need to stay around here. Also to get some of the schools, the local schools, more involved. The Fletcher Elementary, my kids went there, all the way to Rugby, all the way to West Henderson High School. So to get them more involved, hands-on community work that we need to see involved, the kids involved in. So.
Thank you.
Anything else from council? Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Jeff Grove.
How you doing? How's everybody tonight?
Doing well.
Everybody can hear me good now? My name is Jeff Crow. I live in Berkman Village. Been here since in North Carolina since about early 2015. So I am the growth that's coming to Fletcher, basically. And I've been living in Berkman Village for a little under 5 years now. I spent, just a little background on who I am, I spent 30 plus years in industry, variety of roles in engineering, sales, marketing, service and support, senior management before I left the corporate world in about 2013. I currently work, I have 2 small businesses here in North Carolina. Also do some volunteer work. Probably most of that time is with a nonpartisan U.S. Constitution pro-advocacy group that's working to rein in the federal government, put them back into the federal, or put them back into the constitutional box. James, I think, talked a little bit about the Constitution, so that's an organization that's working towards putting the government, federal government, back in the box. As far as my motivation for considering maybe going onto the planning board is really twofold. One, it's strictly a sense of civic duty. I've been very fortunate in my life. It's time to give back, and I have the time and the financial resources to be able to devote my effort to various volunteer type activities. And second, of course, growth is coming here, whether we like it or not. And I just want to make sure I do my part to maybe continue to make sure that there are common sense solutions to the things that are going to face us in this community. As far as qualifications, I have 0 planning board experience, but a willingness and a desire to learn. I'm a lifelong learner. My career is an example of that motivation. I'm very analytical, trained as an engineer, have a very high moral standard informed by my faith, and I'm extremely organized. What I value greatly is I say what I do and I do what I say. I value that in myself, and I really value it in the people that I work with. And I guess fourth would be that based on my volunteer work, I'm very familiar with the legislative process here in North Carolina. I have personal relationships with the local legislators here in the area, the state House and state Senate. So I'm familiar with those processes. So, yeah, I'd open it up and any questions.
Questions from council?
What were the businesses that you say you had 2 businesses? What
I
kind
have one business that I'm involved with analytical instruments to the cement and concrete industry, and basically sales management, business development for a small company based out of Massachusetts. And the second one is I'm a co-owner of a business. Actually, it's based out of South Carolina. We manufacture and supply some specialty products to the poultry processing industry. 2 totally separate things, but it affords me a lot of flexibility in my time, and a lot of different things which I love.
Kim, did you mention you had an engineering background?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mechanical engineer. Don't hold that against me.
What do you foresee your vision would be?
Well, I mean, I would be on a very steep learning curve as far as those kind of issues. I would say that, I would look at it more as what my guiding principles might be in terms of how I would approach this particular role. And those are, North Carolina in general, as I've come to learn, is a very big proponent of personal property rights. And I think that needs to be balanced against the growth. Secondly, I think, and James talked about a little bit, I am concerned that I think, we need to make sure we focus on the needs of Fletcher and Henderson County. That should be the priority, not taking care of other areas or other regions. And we need to make those decisions based on what's best for us here in Fletcher, not be driven by some of these other needs. Third, as I mentioned, growth is coming. We can't stop that, but it needs to be managed, I think, in a way that protects the personal property rights, but gives, does what we need to do as far as the community is concerned, and being the best long-term interest of everybody in the community. And then, because of my business background, I'm always interested in making sure that it's a business-friendly community that will bring jobs here that, good-paying jobs. Those would probably be my 4 guiding principles. They may be naive based on what I don't know at this particular point, but that's what I would be looking at initially.
Thank you for recapping that. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Anything else, Council?
All right, thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Rich Haskey.
Good job on the pronunciation.
Yeah, I was reading in, I was thinking about it in my head. I gotta get that.
Thank you for having me this evening. So I'm a newbie. I just moved into town last year with my family. We have a 3-year-old son and a 7-month-old daughter. I live in the Fletcher Hills neighborhood. A little background, I have a master's degree from the University of Florida. I worked for a contractor back in Florida before I moved here for a couple years. So admittedly, my experience is a little on the limited side, just like the last gentleman. I'm glad he went before me. But what I make up for that is a strong desire to be involved. I really want to set an example to my 2 young kids. I think now more than ever, the political division and just everything that's going on is it's more important than ever to get involved from the grassroots level. And that's what I'm looking to do. I'm a fast learner, very analytical, so I bring some positives to the table on that end. Definitely willing to learn and just get involved however I can.
Did you say, I know you said you had a graduate degree from the University of Florida?
Yes, sir.
What was it again?
Entrepreneurship. So I actually have owned a number of small businesses in the past back in Florida. We owned, my wife and I owned a day spa. We owned a sports business. My friends and I, fresh out of college, actually started a business where we did charity tournaments for local businesses and stuff in the Tampa Bay area. And then we owned a mobile massage business where we would go into various offices around town and do massage. So my wife's a massage therapist, so I kind of all that.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Questions from council?
What's your vision of Fletcher? I've just been asked that with the rest of the folks, but
Yeah.
your thoughts and visions of the future of Fletcher.
For sure, and I'm going to echo what a lot of them said. Build from the inside out, right? We have a great plan in place. Got to meet with Eric the other day, and he went over the Arp Fletcher and everything that's involved with that. And I think that's the way to go, modeling ourselves by other towns in the area, other cities in the area. Another thing, I think we can do a good job of embracing the natural beauty of this area. I think we can take notes from Asheville. They do a great job with that. Just taking advantage of what the land has to offer and, educating. I think entrepreneurship is a big part as well. And influencing in our schools and parents and everything, just making entrepreneurship a good option for kids rather than, just being set in their ways, having to follow an outlined path. Just small businesses are going to be the lifeblood of our growth, and I think it's a good idea to embrace that.
So what led you to leave Florida?
So we actually lived here back in 2014, 2015, pre-kid days. When we were traveling the country, we lived in Asheville for a couple years. Always wanted to make our way back. We thought it would be down the road further, but happened to get a position with a company in Candler, and here we are. Now we're back.
Very good. Who do you work for in Candler?
Thomas Scientific, so it's a scientific products distributor.
Scientific what?
Scientific products distributor? Yep.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything else?
Do you have anything else?
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Next up, we have Mr. Warren Ladford.
Good evening, Council. I believe I'm the newest member of the city. I moved here 3 weeks ago,
Oh, wow.
and probably came a little bit further than most. I'm from New Zealand, so excuse my accent being a little bit different. If I need to translate anything, please let me know. I do have family ties to the area in that my wife, her dad was based in Henderson, so she grew up in Booth Ridge and doing stuff, foam and fabric, I think it was, with the day trip, back in the days when it was only a 2-lane road apparently. Up until a year ago, I was not particularly interested in public service. I had always been working for those ruthless developers who were trying to get away from everything. And not that they're all like that, but I've certainly met a few over the years. But a year ago, I stood for and was voted onto the community board of the village where I lived in New Zealand, and was really impressed by the opportunity to actually influence the outcomes by speaking up for people in the community. And over the years, I've seen a lot of really good development. Well, let me rephrase that. I've seen some good development. I've seen a lot of bad development. I did live in Texas back a few years ago when Frisco, Texas was the fastest growing town in the United States. So I've seen what fast growth looks like. And the district where I was living in New Zealand was the fastest growing district in New Zealand. And so I know what fast growth looks like. I was doing work for the council in Queenstown, which is the fastest growing urban area in New Zealand. And so I know and I hear that we're talking about growth here in Fletcher. And so I'm a trained engineer and have worked in the engineering profession for a long time now. Primarily doing, initially was doing work for development, but over the last decade or so I've been working with governments, and both at a local government and at a federal or central government level. I'm very interested in sustainability, so I'm a LEED accredited professional. My focus is specialty is in neighbourhood development. I was very motivated in 2006 by the tsunami that hit the southeast Indian Ocean. And I went to Sri Lanka ostensibly to rebuild infrastructure. But I was confronted by the humanitarian need. And so I realized at that point that the only reason we build things is to support the people who live in the communities. And so since that moment, I've had a change of heart and look at things very, very differently. I am very interested in I'm interested in seeing the right outcomes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So the question I'm sure is going to come, what is my vision for Fletcher? And I can't answer that question per se because I'm new. I don't know whether the plan's a good plan or a bad plan, and everyone seems to think it's a good plan. What I know and have experienced is that there's a lot of bad development that gets done out there. And I think we learn most from our mistakes. I think it's best to learn from someone else's mistakes. So perhaps we could take those learnings and put them into practice. There's a lot of people talk about lessons learned. Well, oftentimes it's really just lessons recorded. Excuse me, we write down what went right or wrong and then we put it in a file and never look at it again. Perhaps we should be pulling those things out and looking at them and deciding that we do things the way that they should be done in our area. And it's not just a passing interest. I am still working remotely for governments in New Zealand, for councils. So although I live here, I'm still doing some work back there. But I'm also working on my PhD, so putting my interests into practice. And the topic I'm looking at is quantifying the post-disaster relationship between the built environment, the things that we build after disasters, and social well-being, which is the well-being of the people who live in given places. So with that, recognize there's a lot of very qualified people. I'm honored to be here. So happy to answer any questions, but certainly want to do my part as well if you choose me.
Questions from council?
Yeah, do you plan on staying in Fletcher for a long term?
Yeah, we, the question my wife and I were asking is, where do we want to retire? And so we figured that, well, that's,
Here.
so in New Zealand, yeah, we could retire there, but my wife speaks very highly of here, and we've been visited on numerous occasions. And so of all of the world, we thought that this was probably the best place to retire. And so this way I get to come and work for 10 years before I get to retire. So that's why we picked this area.
Good question.
Just out of curiosity, numerous times in your talk, you talked about bad development. What are you thinking of when you talk about bad development?
Well, typically developers are looking at profit, and they're not looking at the community outcomes. So a lot of times that means it's not typically gross violations, it's typically the erosion of principles and interests, community interests. It's where we have opportunistic, getting away with things, cutting corners, where there's an opportunity to benefit a community. And again, I could give examples, but I'm not knowing your plan. I could stick my foot into my mouth very quickly. But I know there's certain things that are done in some areas which you look at and go, well, actually, that's actually not helping the community at all. It's not supporting pedestrians. I know we've had some people talk about pedestrian-friendly centres. The reality is that, by and large, we're a very car-centric country. I guess I shouldn't, but I am a dual citizen, so I'm a US citizen. But we are very car-centric, so if we want to be pedestrian, we need to think about, well, that doesn't just happen. We need to think about how we create the environment. So that means when developments come along, we need to look at, does this encourage or support those things that we want to achieve? And if it's not, then we need to look at how do you actually effect the change. And there's ways of doing that, having worked with government before. And oftentimes just saying no isn't necessarily the best outcome. Sometimes it's the approval with these conditions. And those conditions are where you're able to get the things that you need that benefit the community.
Thank you.
Very good.
Do you have any other questions for council? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Miss Robin Monty. She absent. Then we'll skip to Mr. John Reynolds.
Mayor, Russ, coming before council for the third time seeking appointment to the Fletcher Planning Board. Councilman Reed, thank you for your consideration today, and congratulations on your recent appointment. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas on that for this council in the coming years, and to seeing your approach to working through the issues we face here in Fletcher. Councilman Lance, thank you for your consideration today. I've been impressed so far with your thoughtful, deliberative approach and willingness to consider community input on matters before this council. You've demonstrated your commitment to being a voice for the people, and there's not been one from that time. Councilman Davey, thank you for your consideration today and for your long-time service to the town. Thank you also for your encouragement, kind words, and sage advice. It was St. Patrick's Day last year when you shared with me your motto, if you do things for the right reasons, good things happen. I've worked hard to adopt those words into my considerations as I approach things, and I found for me personally that despite doing things for what I believe to be the right reasons, good outcomes are not guaranteed. I think the manner in which you approach the goal is much or more important on a successful outcome as your base intention. I believe I'm here today for the right reasons, and I submit myself to council today with contrition and humility. Councilwoman Franklin, thank you for your consideration today and long service to our town. In the past, you've encouraged me if services to this community is something I truly wanted to keep trying, and I realize that encouragement may no longer be retained, and that's fair. I felt like a student in one of your classrooms, feeling like I have something important to contribute, with my hand raised high in the air, desperate for recognition for a long time. That frustration is sometimes manifested in unpleasant ways, to put it generously. I ask for your fair consideration today and accept responsibility for any actions on my part that make that request difficult to honor. Thank you as always for your work on behalf of our district. As I mentioned, I've applied to join the planning board twice before, and each time I was encouraged to explore other opportunities or to try again when a seat was vacated. My experience with the planning process and devotion to the community have only gotten stronger. Since my last application, I've been present for many presentations to this council from our planning director and have paid close attention to the types of issues which require consideration. I'm familiar with the complications that arise and with our planning director's approach to addressing the complexities of these issues and unique questions that are brought to town for consideration. I promise, if appointed, to approach the work on the planning board with the same diligence and tenacity I've demonstrated on other pursuits. I've walked every inch of public road in this town and visited many private properties. I'm familiar with the zoning districts and communities from across the entire town. I carry with me the sentiments of a broad sampling of Fletcher residents, and I have myself a copy of the Land Development Code that I'm working diligently to gain, if I can, an encyclopedic familiarity with the document. I hold tremendous respect for the process and work that has gone into developing this document. I found many of the statements of purpose and intent are clearly designed to reflect the town motto, respecting our past and looking forward to what is to come in Fletcher. I followed the deliberative process when questions are raised and the nuances of how code applies to questions which inevitably cut across different pieces of the document in potentially contradictory ways. I paid attention and tried to make myself familiar with the administrative tools Mr. Ruth has used to address these issues and conflicts. I'm once again encouraged by the by the amount of engagement and how many people we've seen apply for these openings. I think it's a new day at Fletcher, and this is a really exciting time to be a part of the growth of this town. Not development growth, but in public engagement. I believe council has much to consider, and in these appointments, you will shape the future advice that they receive. There's great value in bringing differing viewpoints into the deliberative process and allowing for those voices to work together at the board level will lead to better recommendations for you and ultimately better outcomes for the town. District 1 has been underrepresented on the planning board and has been for a long time. I'm glad to see several applicants from District 1 here tonight. I hope with some of these appointments, our district can gain back some of the representation we've been lacking on the planning board. For all these reasons, I would make an excellent addition to the planning board, and I humbly ask for your support and nomination. Thank you. And I'll preempt your question if you like. So I don't think I wouldn't portend to profess my vision for what the plan. I have tremendous respect for what has gone into this document. I think we have a great foundation of zoning, born from foresight and hard work done by the men on the walls and the people who have said on this council for many years. And at the same time, Mr. Reed, Councilman Reed, and as you've seen since starting here, we are kind of at the mercy of what opportunities present themselves, how we're going to apply the code, and whether or not we're going to make an exception if it makes sense with Mr. Ruth's direction. So I think that's the answer. I'm happy and I have a lot of respect for the zoning that we have in place. I think the plans are good, and if we can attract the right investment and see the right things come, we'll be happy. If we see things that maybe don't necessarily jive, but we can do something with the area that we're trying to do, then we'll cross those bridges when they come.
Thank you. I believe your application says something about being involved in development.
Yes, I worked I'm sorry, I missed your name when you presented, but you can tell when somebody works on the other side of the table. It's absolutely true. Profit maximization is the business of development, you know, it's good if you can find a good community partner who's willing to come and develop. But yeah, I've worked for developers for many years. In solar, we develop large solar farms, so it's agricultural development that typically looks for special use permits to develop power plants on what is agricultural. And typically in the places we are, it's very rural, and those tend to be a little not too challenging to get, especially when you're balancing it on the other side with the tax revenue, and the power plants don't use any of the services. There's no water, no roads, no schools, just buckets and buckets of tax revenue for very rural communities. So, but in that process, we do prepare my team, my land team, and I consult with them often to come before councils and planning boards to make those requests.
Can you explain a little bit? I know you work for the solar company. What does an origination manager do?
So I work on the wholesale electricity contracting side. So I preemptively organize the sales contract, the wholesale sales contract for the energy the projects are going to produce. So we originate what's called a PPA, power purchase agreement.
So that's, if somebody puts in a big solar farm or something, you work with the agreement that sells it back to the power company type thing?
Yeah, effectively, we work in a market where there's very few buyers, right? It's,
Right.
you know, it's something, every market's different, but a lot of times it's just a single entity, a big cube, right? So those are a little simpler, they get a little more complicated when in places where there's competition.
Right.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Anything more from council?
What did you do before that? I see you just have origination manager for the last 3 years. It's definitely over my head, but what experience did you have before that?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I went 3 years, it'll be 5 years on the 14th, so I'm 5 years there. Prior to that, I was a full-time student and raising my children, and before that, I was in manufacturing for many, many years, before my children were born. I went along 12-hour shifts, weekends, sometimes 30 days in a row, breaking your back, and being away from your family was really challenging with newborns, so I went back to school and landed where I'm at now.
Do you have an engineering type degree or
I don't know, it's in economics.
economics?
Yeah, I work with electrical engineers and talk to them, right? We work on problems, but no, I don't have an engineering.
Okay. Fine.
Any other questions from council? Seeing nothing, thank you. And next week, we'll fill those vacancies. We have one in District 2 and the 2 at-large vacancies that the council reviews applications and considers. What we've heard tonight, the council will fill those seats.
And I'd like to add one other thing, the same comment I mentioned when we had the filling of Keith's seat here on council. I'm very impressed with the community stepping up and so many people wanting to get involved in the town. I wish it would have happened a long time ago, but at least we're making some really good progress at this point. Thank you.
Were you going to say something more?
Yeah, I echo Bob's comments.
Yeah.
I was looking for a comment from me or from council, but Eric had worked, I know you have a hard copy in front of you, and we emailed an electronic copy of the list of the applicants, where they reside by district, and then the vacancies on the planning board. You know, one of them is the District 2, so it has to be someone residing in District 2, and then the other 2 are at large, so it could be anywhere in town. But just to try and help you see the spread of where people reside, what district, versus the vacancies. I thought this might be helpful, so.
Definitely.
So, yeah, so thank you to Eric for putting that together.
Thank you, Eric.
It's helpful to y'all.
So which one's at large right there? I know it's District 4.
The
also
bottom
it's
two.
in District 2.
Yeah.
It's Pat Clark, I guess, is
Yeah, the only one by district, yes, is Pat Clark. It was from District 2, and that was a District 2 seat on the planning board, so it has to be someone from District 2.
So Keith's at large.
Keith came off from at large, and Robert Lance, so.
Anything else from council? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Mr. Manager, staff report and recommendations on the ARP allocation.
So in your packet, you've got a copy of a staff report that I worked on. I'm going to give you a little more information or context to the ARP or ARPA, or I've been calling it ARP funds. So it's item 6. I believe it's behind, item number 6 in the agenda. So last year, we received an allocation from the federal government. Pretty much all local governments in North Carolina, and I believe across the country, received an ARP. It's the American Rescue Plan Act, and it was in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and recovering from that. The allocation that we received was a little over $2.6 million. And the initial rules that came out on this and funding categories, the funding categories seemed pretty broad, but the restrictions within them were pretty onerous. And I think the federal legislators got enough feedback on this that they created a lot more flexibility into the final rule. So in the final rule, it's now opened up. There's 4 general categories. I've got them bulleted in the report. Basically similar to last time, it was, like direct benefits, people have been negatively impacted, economic impacts, premium pay for eligible workers who are performing essential work during the pandemic, some infrastructure areas, so water, wastewater, broadband infrastructure. And then the last one I was going to spend a little more time on, revenue replacement for lost revenue growth. So what this means is kind of what we could have been damaged for long-term revenue growth as a result of the pandemic. And under this, they created this you can claim up to 10 million of your allocation under this category. Well, we're less than 10 million, so we can do the whole allocation under this category. And within that, they're saying for any general governmental purpose that we are authorized to do, which makes that pretty broad. You still have to follow all the federal requirements for receiving grant money, which is a lot of hoops to jump through. There's a lot of conditions that have to be met. Kind of like when we did the streetscape improvements up here on Highway 25, we received DOT monies, but it was federal highway money that went to the state and then to us. So there was a lot of federal requirements that we had to abide by to get the Highway 25 corridor improvement. So all those, it was finished a couple of years ago. Under the new rule, and with that last category, that revenue replacement for lost revenue growth, so general government services. I talked to you back with the preliminary rules, some general areas, maybe stormwater projects in town, or sanitary sewer, so just generally speaking, sewer projects. We don't have specific ones as far as stormwater designated. The sewer, we have some areas that we know in town that are unserved by sewer. We still have to go through MSD or Metropolitan Sewerage District requirements if we want the sewer route. And you'd have to have the people in there wanting sewer and signing on the sewer. It's complicated to do that. And the storm sewer, not as much, stormwater, but you'd still have to narrow down specific areas where you'd want to do stormwater improvements. What I'm suggesting, and you don't have to make a decision tonight or next week to vote on it, is to think about, and I'm recommending this, but some projects that you've already determined as priorities and that would be eligible as we're interpreting the ARPA money now, our allocation, and those two, and I've listed them in there. The one is extension of the Greenway from Fletcher Community or Billmore Community Park over to the Meritor property. We've done some planning on that. Equinox Environmental did some very preliminary analysis of two different options. A soft trail extending at 1.3 miles from where it ends at the park and then way across the Meritor property. I'm not sure on the exact terminus, but I think it's going all the way to 26. So it would connect to potentially a bigger network. And then the other was a much more costly, that was like $750,000. Then the much more costly paved one, which would include a bridge going over the creek, at one point was up into the neighborhoods of $3.5 million almost. I would suggest as low-hanging fruit here, and something that you've got a lot of feedback from the public as far as desire for facility additions to parks and recreation, that you consider maybe prioritizing that project with a portion of the ARP monies. And it doesn't have to be the entire length of what Equinox Environmental initially worked on, which was 1.3 miles. It could be half of that or a portion of it that gets us going that way to extend potentially a much greater regional network of trails. So that's one, and it's something that we put a lot of thought and planning into, and is a priority, and it adds real value in a relatively short period of time as far as public facilities for the town, for our residents. The second one I mentioned in here, and our Heart of Fletcher Town Center project, we've been trying as part of the we call it institutional uses, like town hall was planned to be here. A community college and library presence we've been trying to be planned for the north side of town hall here. And as you all know, the county is looking for an EMS location spot or location for a new EMS station. What I'm suggesting in here is, because they formally had a location for the EMS station and that fell through, so that's still up in the air, it's still a need, is we revisit the planning of a multi-use facility that would include a library, EMS station, and the community college is very interested in having a presence here. Even at the county's last big budget meeting, where they hear from department heads, they're a big funder of the community college system, and Dr. Leatherwood had brought up again the interest in having a presence of a training facility here in Fletcher. So, having said all those things, and Mayor Blakely and I went to, the county's been doing this meeting with discussing like potential joint uses or just problem solving, or what we're all trying to figure out to do with ARP monies. We've been attending some of those, and we attended the last one and just kind of threw that out there, not speaking for the rest of council, because you may ultimately go in a different direction with ARP monies, but knowing that this has been a priority to try and get this facility built here, and enhance our downtown district, enhance the town center project, is look at the possibility of doing a joint project with the county, with a portion of part of their 10 million. They're getting over 20 million in funds on this, but that first 10 million, they have quite a bit of flexibility like we do. Use a portion of that. They're getting a little over 22 million, 22.8 million, but use a portion of their that 10 million allocation to look at a joint project here. You've got money readily available, plug into it. It may not pay for everything, the cost of a facility. But see, is that a possibility that they want to do a partnership on it?
What's the cost on the full cost on the EMS, or treatment library, EMS and facility? What's the cost of something like that?
You're probably, and Trevor, this is really off, but I can tell you the library, because we've done a lot of work on planning on that.
Okay,
Of
so
course, that's to be about $4.5 million.
So if we put the 2.6 million, the whole thing into it as half, and they put their half in it, it's done, is what you're saying?
Yeah, for that part of it, but that's just the library.
Right, and it has to be, you said it could be, ever look at other areas, maybe not even in town, so.
Yeah, but I think they're still interested in this location. They had another one on Old Airport Road where the car wash is, and that fell through.
So they could put the little extras in, since it's more of a county EMS and stuff like that, we put the 2.6 in it, and they could come up with the rest.
Yeah.
It's just money that's coming from the variable. To me, that's just my opinion, is, that's what everybody's been pushing, has been the thing for the library, been on the thing, it's just more important than another walking trail, I hate to say that, but it seems like, since that money's there.
Well, I will say, I'd like to see both these parties having some way or another. I will say, if I recall correctly, on the Road Associates survey, but Greenway's the number one thing that folks said they wanted.
Yeah, it right.
The Road Associates.
It was a study of what people in the town wanted, to send out questionnaires to people, and historically, walking paths are almost always number one, what people want more than.
Rose Associates was a little more focused on the town center, Arp Fletcher, but they're still, but we did a survey out to all our residents and did, all the tax of the taxpayers, or properties where we had the tax billing, and the response we got back as far as parks and rec facilities, the number one was Greenways, extension of Greenways.
For parks and recs.
Yes, yes.
Before the growth of Fletcher and everything else, it seemed like the library always heard the last 4 to 5 years has been.
It's definitely important.
Yeah, I even sent a bumper sticker 2 weeks ago that says they support the Fletcher Library. I don't know.
That's in the library part.
Yeah, it's like, and that's, to me, it's trying to think of more bang for your buck, and that's a big bang.
Yeah, and that may be it. I was just trying to suggest a spread of the funds to try and kind of kill 2 birds here. The big thing they're pushing is trying to do something transformational. Like, what's the biggest thing you can do for the community as far as services or facilities that you can get out of this allocation? It may be our entire allocation goes to a library multi-use facility. But I think, go back to your question, it was about $4.5 million, and that's based on a 15,000 square foot facility. The EMS station, depends exactly how many bays in that. I want to say it was more in the 2 million range on that. Now, if the community college, and the efficient way would be to stack that up, the most cost-effective way, rather than multiple facilities on one site. I haven't got a specific, and that's something I want to talk to Dr. Levenwood, if they come along a little bit more as far as preliminary ideas of square footage, uses, things like that. It's probably going to need some more planning. But the other thing on this that can help, if it's determined this is high value and the demand is there for it, there's also additional legislative support. So appropriations from our General Assembly. I mean, our legislators have supported a whole bunch of projects in Western North Carolina. We weren't in any of those, but we need to ask for that help. And you sell a good idea on community benefit, increases your likelihood, doesn't guarantee it, but that can be something to kind of help fill some of the gaps as well. And something I want to talk to, I know that we're trying to set up meetings here with our legislative delegation, but pitched that a little more specifically. So,
I also want to mention, I agree with the mayor that I kind of like to see both of these try to be worked at the same time. The reason that greenway, I think is really important is, I don't know if you're all aware, but they are in the process right now of applying funds and constructing the acoustic trail, which is a rails to trail type thing where they're taking the railroad from Hendersonville to Brevard and they're turning it into a trail. And there's a lot of work that's been done on connecting Asheville's whole greenway system to Hendersonville and Mills River and stuff. And if we can get this greenway close to the interstate, that puts us in a good position that when that other stuff happens, we can tap on. And
You say tap on the Asheville's.
well, it won't be there, really. There's just people that are trying to link all these towns together by a greenway system. And there's so much push behind it. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And I did a lot of work at one time. I was on Henderson County's Greenway Committee, and I did a lot of research. I helped write the standards that are used in Henderson County, and all the research that I did pointed to the fact that whenever you put in a greenway, everybody benefits. It's crazy. It brings in new business. It's great for the community. I mean, if we build this right in that direction, we could theoretically link up the housing subdivisions that are on the west side of Fletcher and let them have access to a greenway that could get people all the way to the park.
I guess it depends on who you talk to. If it's the property owners that runs through there, they don't benefit.
Well, they do.
I disagree.
The property values along the greenway go up dramatically.
Well, I think what we need is we need some sidewalks coming straight up Fenny Bridge, and that'll connect everything that you want to connect. I think that works a whole lot better if you're talking about the Connect Now project, which I know we have a lot of discussion to do with that. Eventually, when you're talking about running a greenway from the airport road straight through acreage that people farm all the way to 25, I think that's a little bit different issue, but I'm all about greenways, and I'm definitely about the rails to trails. I love that. I just think we need to monopolize. We need to get some sidewalks up and down Payne Bridge, and then connect it to whatever, sidewalks and trails.
And that's a good idea, but unfortunately, from what I've been told, when the DOT built Fanning Ridge Road, they did not set aside normal easements. So in order to build sidewalks down Fanning Ridge Road, you would have to buy property for every piece of property that joins that road. There isn't public easement that you can go in and put
And I think
sidewalks.
that's exactly what that gentleman was referring to when he's talking about roads without some deep golf.
And that's why I like this way going across the farmland, our park and so on, get over to the river and then tap onto the greenway over there. I'm not supportive of the one plan where it goes right through people's property that live, have houses and stuff like that. Greenways don't work well if you don't have everybody's support. And if you force it on, it's not going to work.
And that's the reason I was talking about right there. It's just, it's good for everybody, it's not good for everybody.
Yeah, we don't want to.
There's a way, a means to do it,
Yeah.
if it's done correctly.
And it depends on also the farm property. I don't know, have you talked to those folks right here about the farm? Who owns that property?
Well, that's the thing, we own.
Well,
That's it.
there's two properties we'll have to go.
Yeah, good.
The Fernleaf Charter School, which they've already given us approval. I mean, we don't have the easement or a donation of that easement area yet, but there's actually money that they've received that's helping to set this up so that we can get to the point of building that along the King Creek going across their property. And then Charlie Owen owns that farm field that's on that west side of Highway 25 there. And he's indicated support for our project. We just gotta formalize a encroachment or right of way or easement across the border of this farm field there. But again, trying to parallel Cane Creek so it minimizes that impact. And then beyond that is the very large piece of property the town that owns across from Meritor, which we call Meritor property. That's town-owned property across from Meritor. That's about 93 acres.
Mark, two questions. Do you know what Early's have for the park for Henderson for their?
I haven't heard that they're going to do that again.
Okay.
But that's for that Summit Park. Yeah. I don't know.
Okay, I was thinking of that anyway. Another point. So I know you said that the greenway would extend to, or have the potential to extend to other greenways. Is it the acoustic trail?
No,
The
acoustic trail is the one that goes from Hendersonville to Brevard. The one that I'm talking about is the Elvin.
Yeah, and it would go like underneath the I-26 and then that huge housing complex that's been approved that the county is. Yeah, the Johnson Farm. They've created an area that there where it can connect to that, I guess, the Hellbender, the bigger one. So that's.
That's what my question is kind of hit right there. It's like, where's this trail going to go to? I was thinking it's going to go to a middle quarter of it, that's it. Well, is it going to connect to something?
Ultimately, it would connect, if we're able to build it in the next couple of years, it will terminate there. I mean, it won't connect yet.
It's just like an open cornfields.
And we did meet with the DOT and made sure that when they put in the new bridges for I-26, they're designed in a manner that would allow a greenway to go underneath.
To go underneath Henderson?
Where a creek is, kind of like we go under the road over here.
I get over creeks, bridges,
I'm all for doing a greenway, except I guess I thought that the King Creek Meritor Greenway, I thought the proposal would be to run that trail over to the Meritor property so that it would connect to a possible trail to go all the way around the property like we spoke of before. But what I'm hearing is that you're talking about running a trail that eventually will connect underneath the interstate, correct?
And we could
That's okay
build
too.
whatever trails on that property once we're over.
Because we've always talked about it. And I think both of these proposals have great merit, but it really, really bothers me that we're not addressing the need that I know some have, and I know you've listed as unserved areas. We do have pockets of residential area that have sewer issues. And I understood what you were saying, that it would have to be working in conjunction with MSD. And we also have like that creek area where the garden homes are, and they always have issues. And their stormwater and their erosion is just horrible. And there's like no recourse for them. So I would like to see if we can't explore. I understand you want the most bang for the buck, and I understand that. But I would like to visit this in some way, shape, or form and see if we can get some help, because the folks that live in that area, they will never get that creek fixed. And so it will always be an issue for them. And then the areas that I know of that have sewage issues, that's down there near, what is it, Weston Road, where Hugh Clark lives, and then across the street where the Arents and some of those other folks live. And the only way I can figure that you can address that is that we just need to identify those spots. And then if they refuse or don't want to be tied into the sewage, then, okay, check off, that was offered to you. I don't know, I just know that that's a need and that's a problem, and I would like to see if there's any way at all that we can address that in a logical way, and still be able to possibly pull off the other two as well.
Can I ask for a little clarification, Mark? This program, we have been allocated 2.6 million, right?
Correct.
And then we just decide how we want to spend it. So there's no other additional monies to apply for or anything like that. We're just dealing with the 2.6.
At this point, that's just the 2.6. I'm not anticipating more.
Okay.
You know, and you could also couple this with other grant programs.
Right.
You know, I don't think there's a restriction on leveraging this as match. There are some restrictions of things you just plain can't do. And that's like applying it to debt service payments, putting it into a pension fund, replenishing rainy day funds, so that's like fund balance. Like put in your fund balance. So those are some things you clearly can't do. Satisfy an obligation from a settlement agreement, I guess maybe a lawsuit. So those are some things you can't do with the monies, but those don't appear anything you'd want to consider here.
You can potentially leverage it with a grant. So, for example, if we wanted to, we could apply for a grant with Dogwood, for example, who has this health focus. We can maybe leverage that fund for the Greenway and free up some of those other monies for some of the projects she was talking about.
Right. Clean Water Management Trust Fund, they've had monies available. I think it's more water quality, but we try and stretch it to cover water quantity or storm flow and not just water quality issues, basically storm, trying to minimize stormwater impacts. That's another one. Years ago, we tried to identify, and I'm trying to remember what happened, that we weren't able, I guess we got turned down for the grant. We tried to get monies for Wildwood Gardens, had some areas, Sheila, you were alluding to, and we got turned down for that. And we were looking at, it wasn't a permanent fix, it wasn't to fix everything in there, but it helped improve stormwater flow. I think it was looking at increasing the culverts, drainage culverts. There was some other things. Those are the only ones that we know of for some areas that we try to target years. I mean, that's 10+ years ago.
Do you think you'd be able to possibly get any type of grant money to match or pair up with the grid money? I mean, you almost feel like you're double dipping there. It's always the best.
Yeah, the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. It's not a really unique project, so it wouldn't get a lot of points. Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. So, try and get creative here. Just the downside is if you spread it out too thin in too many places, you don't get that tremendous impact of the monies. So,
I mean, it sounds like there is a need, which I think this right here, is something that I appreciate, but also like I was talking about your study, page 3, the library looks like is the looks like it's our priority. That means that study you're talking about right here, page 3. So it sounds like the library, there's actually We don't have to decide now.
No, you don't. I just, we need to be thinking about where you want to apply these monies and start.
I guess we can have conversations when it comes to stuff like this, like this in the county, see if they're even willing to do it.
Yeah, and before you say, we're gonna put 1 million or 1.6, just for sake of argument, I think the bigger question is approaching them, would they be willing to partner and maybe combine some of our resources to do it? And if the answer is no, or we can't agree on what the facility would be, then, maybe I just have to let that go.
And with that being said, I'll suggest, like we did like for library and that mess, proposal that was in the Lancaster County again, but add on the community college portion. They seem to have that willingness, that's come and talk about the potential for this project, and marking out, mission to them, and say no. Like I said, don't mean talking. They seem to have willing to like on regular. So I was always suggesting the letter, is probably the one to them.
I agree. Keith, did you have anything you wanted to thoughts you have on a couple of proposals? Or were you thinking, when you hear all this and forward to forward?
Well, I think the library would get a lot more attention if we had a community college close by to drive that in.
It's a good partnership.
Yeah, a great partnership. Also, know Greenwood will bring a lot of more interest to the Fletcher area. It's a very popular thing now. Greenwoods.
Just so you know, Keith, if you weren't aware, the community college is utilizing some of the rooms that we make available here on the public classes.
Oh,
Yeah, it's not curriculum, it's continuing ed, so jewelry making, what have you,
yeah.
that aren't curriculum type stuff, but I think they'd like to have, get a facility here or something dedicated more for curriculum classes. But they're doing classes regularly in our building on the continuing ed side.
Been doing that for a number of years.
Yeah. So there's definitely an interest and demand for that. Yes, for the more class space here.
Yeah.
And maybe, Mayor, for next week, I don't know if this has to be by motion, but maybe just next week you take action if council is comfortable that you do a letter to the county approaching them about that, we can draft something. Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Anything else from council? Okay, we'll move on to item 7. Projects, I think those bids are sometime this week.
Yes, we're due tomorrow at 2. We'll do a bid opening with Ben Caffey and McGill Associates. And hoping for good bids. And then he'll certify the bids, the bid tabulation, and then I'll send that to y'all. And then you'll see, who the lowest responsible bidder is. We're hoping and get it within our target budget to try and get all 3 streets, actually, 3 streets and a drainage culvert on 1 street. So we talk mostly on South Chase, 3 streets. So Wednesday will be the deadline, this Wednesday, February 9th. Had a decent amount of interest on it, and we're hoping for at least 2 or 3 good bids. And then we'll review that, and then I'll hopefully be recommending the lowest responsive bidder to you at the regular meeting. But I'll let you know in advance who it appears to be.
That'll be for next week?
Yes, for next week.
And this makes the town more town better, the past years, committees will build, bar, county, asphalt, all done. So the period of time is 6, 8, 8, I believe that's 12, 8, how many young league, it takes 12 weeks, 8 months, 6 weeks, 8. I think you can leverage that to 6 time, or I think extra times you want to. But you know, the 12 months, let's see, we can't be trying to child, legal placement, child, lawyer, or doctor, placement of child, employee, soon, discharge charges, medical, we got to present medical whatever. I think those are nevertheless, I know it's even staff expectation this year. This could be a tremendous support as it's kind of hard to know how many people they take however, I know last year she said 3 people which would have been unpaid unless they get time market. This could be a tremendous open that question, we all got a chance to review policy, what hopefully that will be under review next week. And what you tell me, I can't, but she will, great, I urge council support, I think it's really important. Places, better,
I think it looks pretty good. It supports our employees, which should number one in the organization, should support their employees. This is one question I was going to ask, but I guess she should answer it. How much she feels like it sustains the same budget.
She has expressed very home. She said, like any other benefit. So I take sick leave, we're just have that, but it's hard if I understand.
Yeah, the bigger issue is if someone stays out 12 weeks, let's say under the old FMLA, you can either use leave and get paid for part of the time. If you have enough vacation and sick time, you can get paid. You can use that leave and get paid the entire 12 weeks if you're asking for it, if you need it. Under this, it gives a lot more benefit to the employee because obviously those 6 weeks the town would pay. They wouldn't have to use any of their accrued leave. The real impact isn't so much dollars, it's more if that person's staying out longer maybe than they might otherwise because they've got more paid leave, is getting the job done, is doing the work. That's the bigger impact than spreading that among other staff or if it got so difficult, do you look at temporary staff? I mean, it's just one thought, but that's the bigger deal is they're not there to do the work.
You hire somebody part-time to do that work, you're basically having shorthanded.
Yes.
You're actually paying them anyway, so.
Yeah, you're already paying them, so
it budget issue really.
Right. So, because they're already getting, their full-time positions, they're already making that money.
Current policy, they would be able to use their vacation time or sick time currently under FMLA, right?
Correct, yeah, and if they have enough and they wanted to use it all, they get paid the entire time. If they don't have it, then they can go unpaid for some portion of it, so.
I'm not overly familiar with the FMLA. Do they have a good definition of what seriously ill means?
I haven't dug down into the minutia of.
That's the only concern I had, birth of a child and adoption, those are pretty clear. When you're talking about a child that's seriously ill, what does seriously ill mean?
Or other family member that
I
you're
think that's defined by the employer, because, FMLA is your baseline, this is what you gotta be. Now, the 4-year can go above that, like we're talking about right now.
Right.
So,
So you say Heather probably have a good definition for that?
I'll ask,
I would think that it would be under consideration if someone is totally dependent on someone else, or such a serious situation where they can't be left alone, or have to have that 24/7 care. But it'd be interesting to see what you find, how that's defined.
mhm. Okay.
You have anything else from council? Okay. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, discussing filling vacant seats on council advisory board. I'll just make a few comments. I'd like to take the ARP committee. I've already went with Mark and all the other chairs were going. If there's no opposition from council. Would anybody like to be my alternate for that? Or Mark, did you be the alternate?
Yeah,
Or Keith, you want to be the alternate? You're fine, so I think Mark's gonna go regardless.
Yeah, the managers are going to those
Yeah.
meetings, but
Okay, we'll put Keith as alternate. Then the other thing I wanted to extend, when I first came on the council, Bob let me have his seat on LGCCA. I want to see if Trevor or Keith want to take one of the alternate positions. Well, it's not even an alternate, you serve with me, you'll be able to call.
Right, it should be you as the mayor and
Then one other council member.
Yes.
so what is the acronym, what's it?
Oh, gosh.
Local
government committee.
It's down there in the bottom of the
Cooperative
thing,
Action.
local government committee for
There
cooperative
we
action.
go. Phew, I'm glad it's down there, thank you.
it's,
Never.
just to tell you what, it started way back when, you had franchise agreements for cable, and then that went away, and they just kept meeting. So it's all the municipalities in Henderson County and Henderson County government. And so the mayor and one council member from each of the municipalities, and then the chairman of the board of commissioners, and one other commissioner attend these meetings, and it's just to talk about regional, within our county, issues.
And I'll say the benefit that I got, and I appreciate Bob for letting me take a seat on my council for Trevor, or keep on extending this to, it gives you a chance to meet some of the elected folk in Henderson County, get to make those connections, and that's a tremendous support. You get to learn from them, learn about what's going on in the community, so that either of you want to.
They only meet quarterly.
Quarterly,
And
we just
take
canceled the
turns-
January
We
meeting.
take turns hosting. We were supposed to host in January, but we
That's
had no agenda items, so we didn't have a meeting.
Yeah,
That,
I
and that
think-
was the ICE day, because it was after Martin Luther King. It's the
Yeah.
third Tuesday of quarterly.
Yeah.
So it's the
So
third
next one's in
Tuesday of that
April.
month.
Right.
Yeah.
So the next one will be in
I'll actually
April.
start with you.
Yeah, right. And then with that being said, does anybody want to relinquish any of their other committee assignments for another member on the council?
The Fletcher Fire and Rescue, I think that Trevor would be able to serve in a much better capacity than myself, and I don't mind being his alternate
His alternate.
if he would consider taking that, because he
All right, you,
has
Trevor?
Yeah, absolutely.
lots of.
I figured that might happen tonight. I read it.
I'm gonna bow down on that one, yeah.
Okay.
Leave it to the experts.
Let's see, let's get, do we have anybody that's going to serve as an alternate for the Water and Sewer Advisory Council? When do they meet? Or do you want to serve as an
When do
alternate?
they meet?
We do quarterly.
Quarterly?
What time of day?
It's usually in the evening at, usually like 6, I think.
Okay. You want to serve as alternate?
Yeah, I would.
Great.
The Transportation Advisory Committee, we don't have an alternate there. Anybody want to serve as an alternate? We don't have to.
Those, the Henderson County Transportation Advisory Meeting meets roughly once a month. They meet at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the French Broad River Metropolitan Planning Organization. They meet roughly once a month, and they meet at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But that group, because of COVID, they started doing them via Zoom, and because the office that is being held in is way out Leicester Highway, and I think partially because of that, a lot of us expressed our opinion, and I think they're pretty much committed to keeping that available via Zoom, so it's a lot easier to attend than having to drive all the way to the other side of Henderson County. But it would be nice if I had a backup on these, so that if I'm on vacation or something, somebody goes.
So which one's got the Zoom we're talking about?
The Zoom is the French Broad River Metropolitan Planning Organization.
You said they both meet monthly?
Yeah.
What day of the week?
The French Broad River Metropolitan Planning Organization is on a Thursday, and it's like the last Thursday of the month, something like that. And the Henderson County Transportation Advisory meets on a Wednesday, and that's like the third Wednesday of the month. And that one meets at the old county building on, what is that? Not King Street. What's the one that goes north, one-way street? It's where the farmer's market, the old the farmer's market is on Saturday morning.
Church Street.
Church Street.
I mean, I can do the Zoom if it's Zoom here today.
Okay.
Break loose on that.
And any time that you want to sit in on one, once we get you put on the list, they'll send you an email with the link to get in on, and you can see what's going on.
Okay.
Bob, I'm not sure about the Henderson County Transportation Advisory, the Henderson County TAC, if that has to be
That may be
a council member, or that could be a staff as the alternate. If you all wanted me to be an alternate to you.
Yeah.
Okay with that, Mark?
If that's, if you're having a hard time.
Okay.
Well, do we need an alternate for the partnership? When are they?
Don't think so.
I don't think you need an alternate.
You don't need an alternate,
Yeah,
okay.
that's my understanding, so that's.
I will offer one more thing. You don't have to, but Keith did express interest in LGCCA as well. I know you have a Fletcher Fire and Rescue. Would you mind giving that?
Yeah, that's
Or
right.
Keith, if you're interested in LGCCA, so you have something?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Keith could be in the LGCCA, we could be in the.
Yeah, Keith and I do LGCCA.
Okay.
Thank you, Trevor.
I'll redo this next week and have it in front of you for verification, this chart, so that we make sure we're all in sync with everything.
I was trying to say, did you keep up with all of that?
I'll take it.
I think so.
And then once we approve it next week, then you'll send out the notices to the organization saying these are our
Yes.
duly appointed.
Yes.
The LGCCA, you go to the meeting and the mayor.
Okay.
So it's
And
not
they're-
really, it's not really an alternate, it's just.
And then
Yeah,
the third Tuesday quarterly, is that the one?
Yes, it's
Yes,
the third
yes,
Tuesday
that's
quarterly.
correct.
And we do sometimes skip them if they don't have enough.
Yeah, and that's what
Yeah.
happened last month, is we skipped it, we didn't have any agenda items.
I guess we met more than twice last year, if I remember.
Yeah,
correctly.
it skips around, it just depends on what's going on. And
That's
each
right.
municipality in the county take turns hosting, and it's always downtown at the Henderson County Historic Courthouse at 3 o'clock on the third Tuesday of the month, quarterly. Blah, 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 blah.
Thank you, Christine.
Christine, when you redo this chart, could you put on there another column for when the meetings are and where they are?
Okay.
So everybody's clear.
I need to make sure I've got that down, because
Okay.
I only know about LGCCA, but I'll work on that.
Okay, thanks.
Do you want each respective person to send meetings,
Yeah, I can send
meeting
those
times
times
to you?
for-
Because I can do that for fire and rescue
Yeah, that'd be
and for economic development and water and sewer advisory council.
I can go
Okay.
ahead and let you know, Land of Sky meets on the last Wednesday of the month at noon.
Okay. What about the partnership?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a quarterly meeting, and I think it varies, so I'm gonna have to look on the calendar to see which, I think it's on Tuesday.
What about water and sewer?
Water and sewer, it's quarterly as well. And it's, let me double check.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Just meeting quarterly, I'm thinking, which one's Monday, which one's Tuesday?
Brittany, can tell you, I
Okay. Do everything else, council?
Fletcher Fire and Rescue is the third Wednesday of every month. And the time for that is 12. And I'm on the MSD board too, but that's a nominated position from the county. And I go with Bill Lapsley to that. And that's once a month on Wednesday at 2 o'clock.
I'm sorry, once a month on Wednesday?
Yes, ma'am, at 2 o'clock.
Okay,
The third Wednesday of the month.
okay. All right.
That's not on here, is it?
No.
MSD?
And,
Yeah.
and I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so that's
Well, I
Metropolitan
noticed it
Sewerage
wasn't on here,
District.
so I didn't know if I
Does that need an alternate? Do you know?
No,
Are you
it's
okay?
a nominated
Oh, I'm sorry,
position.
you did say that.
So I served with Bill Lapsley.
Yeah,
He's
so
commissioner.
council had nominated you to serve on that. right?
Commission, the
And the
Henderson
commissioners-
County Commission.
The commissioners had to do
Commissioners
that.
Board.
Okay, they have to, yeah.
Any other dates, Kristen?
You want?
I don't think so. I'll redo it tomorrow, like I said, and, see if I can get all that. The time meeting is more of a concern to me than the people serving, because I think I've got that straight.
Okay. All right. Well, there's nothing else from council, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Is discussion on the mayor pro tem seat for this term. I believe in 2019, we had a discussion about trying to do that after each election, which I think we're actually supposed to do it the first meeting after the election, unless we schedule a specific time. It's probably more appropriate that we did it now since we have a full board. You guys want to?
No,
Okay.
it's just.
Yeah,
that's
I
probably
think,
more important.
I think it'd be better to aim to do it once the board is full.
Yeah, which we have a complete board now, which that makes sense. I do want to go ahead and vote on this tonight, and we'll take it off the agenda for next week. I would suggest if Bob's still willing to serve for a motion for Bob to continue serving as mayor pro tem. If you're not willing to serve anymore, then I'll suggest Councilwoman Franklin.
I'll do it.
Okay. Anybody like make a motion to have Bob serve as mayor pro tem?
I'll take
I can second that.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second, we have any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem again. All right, Mr. Manager, your comments.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Just a couple things. So last month, you approved the agreements for the town center project. So we've executed that. It's taken a little bit of time to get all our attachments, exhibits to the agreement ironed out and dates in there plugged in. So we've executed the agreement. I'm waiting for the signed one back from them, but we've got that done. So kind of next steps, following their timeline, maybe start marketing the property, the project for vendors in there. They're going to be doing additional site planning on the property. There's a traffic study that was a requirement, and that's underway right now, so they're working on a traffic study. And then, of course, working with DOT for the right-of-way acquisition for those two pieces at the northwest and southwest corner of the property. So those are some things that are underway right now, and I know Will Bowie, the engineer for the project you've met, he's met with Eric to start working on some of those things on the site planning. So that's moving forward. update on and if there's any questions on any of these
Yeah,
things.
I got a question on that. The biggest concern that I have with that property is when they want to use it, will it be ready in terms of the demolition and all that stuff? And tied to that, my big concern is, will Fletcher Feed, or whatever the hardware store is called, will they have everything that they need to offer that property in time for us to demolish the building?
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because, and I sent something in an email to you to give you a little bit of information about that, but yeah, that's potentially our biggest challenge. If we get a bidder selected and we get a contract done, and in the RFP it says 60 days, I mean, if we need more time, we still have some time in there. It was 120 days after approval of the contract to get that done, which puts us into May. So if they don't finish in April and we extend it to May, there's still enough time. What Sammy has told me, I just met Sammy Johnson, the owner of the business. I just met with him. Well, I gave him official notice, March 1st, to be, vacating the property. His plans right now are to close the store by the end of this current month. The challenge after that is he's trying to do an auction, and he told me he set this up before I gave him notice. So, I mean, we could push him to move the auction up, and I'm going to ask him to do that. But his auction date with the auction company is not till April 16th. So that's a potential challenge depending on the contractor that's selected. It's going to take some time, though, even once we select someone and we do an agreement with them, to get the authority to tear down the 3 buildings that were kind of part of Fletcher Lawn and Garden, because they're in the railroad right away. So there's a part of the agreement, you have to get a right of entry, so there's an application process, and then they get a right of entry agreement to basically be working in the railroad right away to tear down those 3 buildings. It's 3 buildings. So I'm working on that. That is right now a potential challenge because of the tenant situation. We don't have any other tenants on there, so everything else is, straight tear down and removal.
But I know Sammy still has an awful lot of stock on that property. I couldn't believe it. You wouldn't know he's getting ready to shut down.
Yeah, they've done tremendous business in the last 2 years, and so he approached me about trying to extend it, and I said we just can't do that to like June. But I'm not sure why. I don't know, maybe scheduling with the auction company, why it wasn't closer to the date of closing the store. I know he's got stuff to liquidate. I know this is not our problem, but that's just.
Probably ought to also ask him, once they have the auction, how long is he giving to people to clear the stuff off the property?
Yeah, right. That's a good question. I'm going to talk to him about, can you move that up, or talk to, it's King Auctions, because it does start pushing it. Now, we could execute our contract a little bit later, and make sure the 60 days has plenty of time for them to complete their work and get their last 3 buildings done and make them maybe the end of their demo process. But it's a potential problem right now with the auction part. So that's a good question. Thanks for bringing that up. The budget process, especially for our newest council member, and Keith, I'll email you, this is the timeline for our budget process. There's kind of some key dates in there. So right now, budget department heads and myself and Heather are working on numbers. Full budget requests are due into me from department heads by the end of this week. And then I'll be going through that and refining some of the information they put in, and then be sharing that with you all in advance of, it's closer to the date of the meeting, but for the March 22nd, we call it all-day budget workshop. It may not take all day to get through everything, but it's generally from 8 o'clock you get here for if you want any breakfast items, and then we try and start about 8:30 and to roughly 3:30. But just make sure, again, you all have that date, March the 22nd, that's a Tuesday in that month, for that workshop. And so that's just an update on the budget process. The shred event, so we do, this public shred event for anyone who wants to show up. We try and limit it to no more than 2 boxes of materials. Christine set that up for April 23rd, and I'll give another reminder on it, but just to let you know that's coming up April 23rd. That's a Saturday from 9 to noon in the south parking lot, the big parking lot here at Town Hall. And then we'll also do, the police department does, those medication turn-in events called Operation Pill Drop. So the public can do that at the same time. So they'll have a booth set up for that. And just so you all know, I think most of you know, maybe for Keith's benefit, our police department has set up a drop box in the lobby of the police department for people to bring unused or expired medications, and they're doing it. People are bringing it and they're turning it in. What they do is once they get materials building up in there, they turn it over to the county and they incinerate the medications. But anyway, so that's being well used. But so we'll do a shred event and medication.
What date did you say the shred event was?
April 23rd, so not till April. So, and then last thing, I know I mentioned last week about the gateway sign in front of First Citizens. Public Works has cleaned the base of it. The panels have come off, the old sign panels, and they were trying to get it done by the end of January, but it wasn't able to do that. So we're hoping fairly soon here to see the new panels complete and put in there. So it should be a tremendous improvement in our gateway sign there, and then possibly look at doing another gateway sign of some similar fashion, maybe at the south entrance to town coming in. So, and I just added this to the list here. I've been trying to set up a meeting with Senator Edwards and Representative Moffitt. I was trying to do February the 15th. I know it was good with Senator Edwards' office, but I haven't got confirmation back, and I called them last week and I still haven't heard from Representative Moffitt. So we may just do this with Senator Edwards. It's just a little more efficient with our state legislative delegation if we can get both those legislators together, especially if there's any conflict in what we're discussing or asking of them. So I'm working on that. It's getting closer to that date. So if we can still do it then, it'll be later in the afternoon. We'll do it. And again, we can only have 2 people there, so we don't, go over our, open meetings issue. So I know Sheila's expressed interest. We're trying to do it later in the afternoon. Yeah, we typically have the mayor and one council member sitting in on this. So, and then I'll report back kind of how it went. And I'll get Keith to our legislative priorities list so you can see what that's about. And that's all I have.
Great. I just have one more item I want to talk about, the letter that we drafted up in response to Mike Gagney before we left this evening. I would like to caution council before I'm sending it to the majority of council to send it, and I'll send it to you this evening, Keith, and maybe we can make a decision later on this week. I do want to caution council, just because we're about to send a letter asking or saying what we can offer to the county for the library and EMS facility. In addition, this isn't the entire commission as a whole talking, it's just Mike Gagney respond. I disagree with the things he said, like all of us did, but maybe we don't need to ruffle the feathers at this point, just an idea to think about. I'm not sure what y'all's thoughts on it.
I agree, don't want to kick somebody in the shin and ask for a favor later. So.
Right.
I'm the same.
Usually not, I'd probably say no to you. Okay, so we're just
I
all,
would rather just back off just a little bit.
okay. I agree.
The timing of it, I talked to Mayor a little bit about this, and it's not the best timing if you're gonna do that, but.
I'm also a little bit concerned the fact that he went to the newspaper, which to me, that makes it sound like it's coming from the whole commission, even though it's not.
Yeah, and I know we had a resident that seemingly, I don't think he quite understood that, which is fine. I don't think a lot of folks does, but nevertheless, we'll keep it moving. Okay, with that being said, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed? We